All right, we're here with Eric Schlosser, who the whole time we were making the movie, and the movie came out, everybody wanted to know why he wasn't in the film. So we were finally able to nail him down for the DVD.
It's because of you.
It's because I chased. He wouldn't do it.
No. It's just I heard stuff about you, and you know, it's only blackmail that's gotten me to do this.
And so, it all comes around. So why do we love fast food so much?
Tastes good. Tastes really good. I mean, I ate tons of it while I was researching my book, and I, like you, made an effort to have everything on the menu in different places I went to. It's scientifically designed to taste good. They don't just come up with the recipe for McNuggets in an hour and say, hey, let's cook it. It's like they spend months and months figuring out the exact proportion of the salt and the sugar and the fat, and they test it on thousands of people or hundreds of people before it ever comes to a store. And one of the reasons I did my book is I just eaten fast food all my life and was curious what's in it.
So what's in it?
One of my favorite pages in my book is the list of ingredients of the flavoring of a typical fast food strawberry milkshake. And just the flavoring additive of that milkshake is like 40 or 50 bizarre chemical names that I can't even remember or repeat. So, you know, the fast food looks like food that you've eaten all your life, but it's a fundamentally different thing. It's an incredibly processed industrial commodity, again, designed to taste good with different components often manufactured at different factories. So, you know, I wrote about the flavor industry that provides a lot of the taste for fast food. That's one set of factories. You know, they're processing the chicken in another set of factories.
So all the food, everything you smell and taste, it isn't a natural flavor at all?
On the label, it'll often say natural flavor, but anytime you see a flavor additive, whether it says natural flavor or artificial flavor, it comes from some big chemical plant. Some of the taste comes from the food, like the salt and stuff like that, but just look at the list of ingredients for the soda or for the French fries or the nuggets or like that pancake thing you ate. You know,
the McGriddle.
The McGriddle. I mean, it's got the maple syrup built into the pancake.
There's no real maple syrup in there.
Well, it's got the maple flavor. So, you know, in general, the less processed a food has been, the closer it is to something that you should be eating. And I'm not a vegan health food person at all, but if it's ground beef, you know, take a piece of meat, grind it up, that's ground beef. The ground beef that's in a fast food hamburger comes from these gigantic factories that are scary. I had a mistake in the early versions of the book. And in the book I said that the typical fast food hamburger has pieces from 100 or hundreds of different cattle. And I was wrong. You know, someone from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said, no, it's actually 1,000 or thousands of cattle.
In one burger?
In one little hamburger patty. Just 20 years ago, if you got a hamburger,
it's one cow.
It's one cow or one steer. And it's disgusting to have 1,000 cattle, and those could be from 4 or 5 different countries, you know, because of the way that ground beef is now being produced.
How far away or how produced and advanced is this food before we get it?
Weeks, months. I mean, especially at McDonald's, you know, these are frozen hamburger patties. I don't know what the shelf life is, but they come out of a big factory, frozen, put on trucks, shipped all over the country.
So how has this industry changed food in general?
Well, in the book, I mean, I say that, you know, our food has changed more in the last 30 years than in the last 30,000. Well, nobody's ever raised cattle, for example, the way that we're raising them. You know, cattle that go into your fast food hamburger aren't out on the prairie eating grass for their whole lives. They're in these huge, huge feedlots. I mean, these feedlots are just these gigantic pens with, you know, 100,000 cattle penned up in them. It's
right.
Like an industrial system for raising cattle, and they're crammed in there. They're living in one another's, you know, manure. And cattle don't like being in manure, but they're forced to live in one another's manure, and the manure gets on the cattle get sick, they get ground up into ground beef. The hogs are being treated even worse. The hogs are indoors, crammed on top of one another. It's really a cruel, cruel system, and the fast food industry is responsible for most of it. I mean, McDonald's, I think, is the biggest purchaser of bacon in the United States, biggest purchaser of beef. KFC is the biggest purchaser of chicken. And in order to feed these fast food companies and their needs, agriculture in America has been totally transformed in the last 25 years. And it's got huge impact for human health in terms of food poisoning, It's got huge impact on the environment because, you know, there's never been 100,000 cattle in a little area before, and they create an enormous amount of shit. I mean, it's just lagoons and rivers of it that are polluting waterways. And in order to have animals live that close together, you got to give them antibiotics so they don't get sick. And in the rest of the world, they're not producing food this way. I mean, they're beginning to imitate the American model. But the fast food industry has pioneered this industrialization of food, and we're only now seeing some of the harmful consequences. And it's not a coincidence that the last 25 to 30 years have caused, you know, the obesity that you showed in the film, but also the rise in foodborne illness and food poisoning. I mean, this is a system that's really ideal for taking really nasty bugs and spreading it far and wide, you know, through this centralized, industrialized fast food distribution system.
So why do we not think about it? Why do we not think about where our food comes from or what it's going to do to us?
Well, you know, you spent a lot of time in McDonald's. Did you ever get a burger that on the wrapper had the feedlot where the cattle came from? By law, they don't have to put the flavor, all the flavor ingredients that's in the one flavor additive. If they had to do that on the wrapper would have to be like this big just to put all the ingredients. This system survives because the fast food industry has a lot more money to market than Super Size Me did. They're not about what their ingredients are. They're not about showing you, you know, the farms and the feedlots or the workers in the plants. They're creating all this nostalgia and all these warm, fuzzy feelings around the food in their ads, and then you buy the food and it tastes good, and there's absolutely no incentive to look behind the counter. It's like the Wizard of Oz, you know, look behind the curtain, except it's a lot nastier.
Do your kids eat fast food?
No. I mean, they did. I used to take them for Happy Meals.
Right.
They still get to eat a fair amount of junk food. I mean, they get to eat French fries. They get to eat, you know, milkshakes and stuff like that. We just don't buy them from the major fast food chains. And it's just for the simple reason I don't want to give them my money. It's just that simple.
Yeah.
And
there's so many better places to get a milkshake or French fries or a cheeseburger.
Yeah. I don't let them eat ground beef. I mean, I still eat ground beef every now and then, but if, you know, I think...
Is that because you know what's kind of happening
It's
in the
because I
meat
know
industry?
what's in it, and kids are at risk. I mean, if you're elderly, if you're immunosuppressed, if you're a kid, some of these bacteria like E. coli 015787 are really, you know, threatening to kids. So I don't let my kids eat ground beef. The only time they can eat ground beef if it's like in a bolognese sauce that's been cooked. You know, the Italians figured it out a long time ago. You got to cook that ground beef for hours.
Right.
But hamburgers, they're not eating.
What about chicken? Chicken's not much better, is it?
You know, it depends on where you get it. I mean, when we buy meat, you know,
free range.
The things to look for are no antibiotics, no growth hormones, and really important, no animal protein in the feed. Mm-hmm. You know, all the slaughterhouse waste from beef and from the cattle slaughterhouses that they can't feed to cattle anymore, you know, a lot of that stuff's now being fed to chickens. And some of the chicken feed contains other chickens.
So they're basically feeding animals to the animals.
Feeding animals to animals. Yeah, I mean that's where mad cow disease came from. So you know we buy chicken and we buy beef, but we buy it from certain companies, you know, who are doing it the right way. And it's not only better for you, it's, you know, you're supporting the people who are cool, who are trying to do things right and not giving your money to the mean, greedy companies.
But the fast food industry, when it started, it was like the American dream.
Yeah.
You know, it's like this guy starts a business. You know, a guy starts it with a hot dog cart and then builds up a business into a huge national chain. And that's the American dream, right?
Yeah. The people who founded this industry were great. I mean, they were real all-American entrepreneurs, and there was no fast food industry, so no bank would give them a loan. People thought that's a crazy idea, so they did it all themselves. And the fast food industry and these companies really didn't have a big impact on our economy or our agriculture, and really was not a harmful thing when there were just a few hundred restaurants. I mean, when McDonald's had a few hundred restaurants, in the early years it was fresh ground beef, they peeled the potatoes in the back of the restaurant, but it's once it became corporate and once it became huge. I mean, there's 30,000 McDonald's right now, and they have this corporate slogan, which I think is really chilling: one taste worldwide. You know, that was on their website for a while, and that's like, you know, Sig Heil. And when you want to have food taste everywhere exactly the same way, you can't use fresh ingredients because maybe the potato will be just slightly different. You know, you can't use fresh ground beef. So it started out as a really good thing, and it just got perverted into, you know, this monster. Now we're here in California, and there is a chain here in California that was started the same year as McDonald's in 1948, and the people who started it, knew the McDonald brothers, and that's In-N-Out Burger. And if you go to an In-N-Out Burger, I'm not a paid spokesman either, it's not health food. It's burger, fries, and a milkshake, but the milkshake's made from ice cream, real ice cream. Yeah.
No, real ice cream.
And potatoes, like fresh potatoes.
They actually come in they're actually a potato when they come in.
There's a potato in the restaurant, and it's real food.
And it's real ground beef.
Real ground beef, and the workers are paid really well. McDonald's and KFC, and especially, the very big fast food chains really treat their workers badly. And In-N-Out Burger, which is family-owned, never went corporate, is one of the most profitable fast food chains, but they pay good wages, medical benefits, very low turnover, real food. So it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be as bad as it is. But these companies, these big fast food companies, are totally driven by quarterly profits and are not taking any responsibility for the effects of the food that they're selling. And maybe now, because of your film, they're a little more worried about it. But they've been willing to just do whatever they can do to make a buck.
If Ray Kroc were still alive, do you think things would still be the way they are?
I don't think Ray Kroc was that great a guy in this. I think he was, he was into money in a big way. I think the McDonald brothers, if the McDonald brothers who created this restaurant were alive, I don't think they'd be selling the kind of food that they're selling today.
Well, they weren't even involved.
He bought them out. He bought them out, but it was really, their hamburgers and the taste of their burgers and fries that made it such a successful restaurant.
Mm-hmm. Why is it when you go into a grocery store that the best food for you is the most expensive?
Because fruits and vegetables don't get subsidized by the government in the same way that meat does, in the same way that grain and sugar does. By the grain subsidies, corn subsidies, making sugar as cheap as it is, making the meat as cheap as it is. So it's expensive when you buy it, but it's cheap long term because you don't get sick in the same way.
So how do you see the connection between television and the problem that we have right now, the problem with fast food, the problem with obesity?
Yeah, I think that the TV networks have become so dependent on this advertising. It's just a huge source of their revenue that you're not going to see. There's no way in a million years that one of the major networks would have done your film. Would have put up the money for it and aired it on commercial broadcasting. Right. They're just not going to take on one of their principal sponsors. And, if you look at, like in your film, all the food advertising, whether it's, candy or cereal or fast food, you can't look to the mainstream networks for criticism of the system. And that's why, I think there's got to be all kinds of limits on what you can market to children. And in California, there's the beginnings of a movement to limit how you can target children with advertising. The Federal Trade Commission came really close to doing that in the 1970s and was blocked at the last minute. And they were just going to say, hey, if you're going to advertise to kids, you can't advertise foods to kids that are bad for them. Mm-hmm. It's that simple. And I think that should happen now, but you're not going to see that argument being made on the mainstream network.
What role do you think the networks play in changing this?
The people who need to change this are the people who go to these restaurants. I'm really critical of the fast food industry in my book, but at the end I say, hey, nobody's forcing you to go to McDonald's, so just don't do it. Right. And it's that simple. And in order for things to change the business practices of these fast food chains, it's not like tomorrow everybody has to stop going to McDonald's. Yeah. If 1%, if 2%, 3% of people don't go to McDonald's, it has a huge impact on their bottom line. So firstly, ordinary people, make your views known by just not spending your money on this food, and give your money to companies that are producing food the right way or ethically. Right. But government has to get involved, and one of the things that the two of us have talked about is schools. That is where fast food and junk food and soda should just not be allowed. You could be the most conscientious parent in the world and feeding your kids the healthiest food imaginable, and you send your kids to school, and the fast food industry is marketing in the school, and the sodas are in the school, and by law you're obligated to give your children to the state for school. Mm-hmm. Alcohol companies can't advertise in schools, tobacco companies can't advertise in schools, so why should these fast food and soda companies be able to?
Right. How did they get in there?
They got in there because local communities were unwilling to fund education, and we're building prisons instead of spending money on schools. And these schools were really strapped for money, and made this kind of devil's bargain with the devil by letting in the soda companies and the fast food companies to get more money for school bands and school uniforms and textbooks. But what's good in the short term is really bad for these kids in the long term. I mean, the obesity rate among kids is just horrible. If you're obese by the age of 13, it's an 80% chance you're going to be obese the rest of your life. Now, some people can get on the exercise program and the diet, and maybe they'll come up with a wonder drug.
But there's no exercise in schools, so how's a 13-year-old going to do it?
Well, but that's, the game's over by 13. That's sad. So how should government get involved? Fund schools, fund physical education in the schools, fund decent school lunches in the schools, kick these other companies out of the schools. But also, I think you got to put restrictions on how these companies can target children with their mass marketing.
Well, what will happen health-wise? What do you think will happen if we keep on this path?
We're just going to, I mean, the really scary thing is the Center for Disease Control now thinks that the life expectancy in this country is going to start going down because of the huge obesity rate.
Because for what is it, the first time in a couple generations the kids won't live longer than their parents?
Yeah. I mean, that's sad, and it's going to cost. It's going to cost a lot of money to take care of all these sick people and sick kids with diabetes. I mean, in the latest version of your film I saw, 1 out of every 3 kids born in 2000 in the United States is going to develop diabetes. And among African American and Latino kids, it's 1 out of every 2. And these are poor people, and their health care costs for diabetes are going to be borne by taxpayers. And one of the arguments in my book is that this food is cheap only if you look at the price on the menu. But if you look at the cost to society, it's enormous. And the fast food companies and soda companies aren't having to bear those costs. They're basically profiting off of the rest of society having to pay the bill for the health impact of this food in terms of obesity, in terms of food poisoning, the way that the meatpacking companies are using antibiotics, antibiotic resistance. If you add up all these things, this is really expensive food.
Yeah. Well, these people, they always say, you'll hear the corporations, you'll hear all, McDonald's, all of them say, well, it's the parents. It's the parents' fault.
Yeah. Well, parents are responsible too, but it's not the parents' fault if the parents don't have access to the information about the food, and it's not the parents' fault if these companies are targeting children when the parents aren't around, So there's something, there is personal responsibility, and I believe in personal responsibility, but there's also corporate responsibility,
What do you think of Ronald McDonald about what his role has been as the front man for this company?
Well, again, it started out real innocent. Ronald McDonald was Willard Scott, who was the weatherman on the Today Show. Was He created Ronald McDonald for a local McDonald's franchisee in Washington, D.C. in the 60s.
Yeah, he used to be Bozo.
Yeah, he was Bozo. He was Bozo, and Bozo got canceled or something, so they hired him to be Ronald McDonald. And it's like 1965 or something like that, or early 60s. It's a very innocent thing, the idea of having a clown at your restaurant to have the kids come in. But, it got much more insidious as McDonald's grew. And, I mean, now with a cartoon show based on Ronald McDonald, the way that they have linked Ronald McDonald to this food, if Ronald McDonald was trying to get you to eat your spinach or eat something that was reasonably good for you to be eating, it would be different.
Yeah. And Willard Scott got fired.
Willard Scott got fired because when they decided to go national with it, he had a little bit too much paunch.
Yeah.
They wanted look at everyone in the McDonald's ads. I mean, they're thin. Ronald is thin. Maybe he's bulimic. I don't know. But
he never eats the food. You never see Ronald eat the food in the commercials.
Yeah, it's a good point.
He'll never put anything in his mouth. Is Ronald McDonald comparable to Joe Camel, do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, I think Joe Camel's worse. Although, the number of deaths attributed to obesity next year is going to be higher than that attributed to smoking. I think Joe Camel's worse. I think Ronald McDonald began in a more innocent place. Yeah. But now that the harms of this food are becoming well known, it's using this comic character to persuade 2- and 3-year-olds to eat food that isn't so good for them.
How many toys does McDonald's sell a year?
I have no idea, but
billions.
Huge, billions.
Yeah,
a lot.
And how many little Chinese kids are making those toys?
Yeah, well, that's another whole thing.
Yeah.
If you want really inexpensive toys to give away with every meal, you got to pay a little amount of money for them. And they got caught in one instance. One of the suppliers to McDonald's got caught, I think, with child labor a few years ago.
This is an interesting relationship that McDonald's has with Walt Disney.
Yeah.
Which they've had now for like 10 years, I think.
Yeah.
And apparently McDonald's isn't happy because the Disney movies aren't what they used to be.
Yeah.
You know?
McDonald's, made this deal, and it was a better deal for Disney. I mean, if you go to Disneyland, there are no McDonald's at Disneyland, but there are McDonald's French fries being sold, and it's just like a little kind of ad for them. But I think McDonald's wanted a much more, obvious presence at Disneyland. In the book, I write about how Walt Disney and Ray Kroc, who was the founder of McDonald's, served in the same World War I ambulance corps, knew one another as young men, and I think, Kroc modeled a lot of McDonald's after Disney, especially how they market children, coming up with Ronald McDonald and all these McDonald Land, Disneyland. Disneyland's the happiest place on earth, Happy Meal, this whole mentality of how to market to children. All about efficiency and control. I mean, you go to Disneyland, there's hidden cameras everywhere, everything is scripted, everything's under control, workers are under control, same is true at McDonald's. All this high technology, this kind of 50s Eisenhower era belief in technology toward a better tomorrow. I mean, in a lot of ways, that processed fast food is like the Disney version of food, this kind of weird, controlled thing.
What was the response from the industry when your book came out?
They really didn't like it. And they said really mean things about me. And someone actually from a British newspaper called me up to talk about your film. And I read to him what they said about me, and he laughed. He said, that's exactly what they must have some like boilerplate that they put in there about anyone who criticizes them. But I feel very fortunate in that they never sued me. In my book, I write about what McDonald's does to people who criticize them. They sue them. In Italy, last summer, they sued one of the most prominent Italian restaurant critics. And all he did was go to a McDonald's and write about how much he disliked the food.
Right.
He didn't lie about it. He didn't say anything that wasn't true. He said the French fries tasted like cardboard, which to him was true. And they sued him. Now, they backed down from that. In the case of the Greenpeace activists in England, they hired corporate spies to infiltrate London Greenpeace and sit in on their meetings for 6 months. One of these McDonald's corporate spies slept with the Greenpeace activist, for months in order to get information. And
wow,
that hasn't happened to me. Has it happened to you?
Maybe my vegan girlfriend. Maybe she's a spy. Years ago, they planted her with me. Yeah. So right now, McDonald's is rolling out all their healthy salads. All these, their Salad Plus, the Go Active Adult Happy Meal, with the pedometer and all these things. But the fact is, less than 1% of the people who go there buy salads. That's not why we go there.
Yeah.
Are these steps in the right direction, or is this just window dressing? What do you think?
There's steps in the right direction, but it's also window dressing in the sense that they're not doing this because they're sincerely concerned about people's health. They're doing this because your film was successful, because my book came out and criticized their practices. They're doing this because
they got sued.
Because they got sued, because people were putting pressure on them. And I think what will be really important is not them introducing a salad or two on the menu or giving some adults a pedometer, but I think you can measure them by what kind of food are they marketing to little kids whose tastes are being formed in those years. You develop your eating habits at the age of 3, 4, 5. Well, let's look at what McDonald's is selling them. They're selling them burgers, nuggets, fries, and a toy. So if McDonald's were serious about this, they would eliminate all of those food items from their Happy Meals, have relatively healthy food in their children's meals, and give the kid a toy, and they still have lots of kids coming to the restaurant. So we'll see how serious they are by what they're pushing on little kids.
Maybe some deep fried broccoli or something. Like tempura.
I don't know. Something. I think rather than changing McDonald's, I think what has to happen, I think it would be really good if they served healthier food and were more responsible. I think there just have to be new companies that embody a whole different point of view that become bigger and bigger in the marketplace. And I don't want McDonald's to vanish from the face of the earth or disappear or anything like that, but it just shouldn't have the power it has. It shouldn't have the control it has. It shouldn't be as mean as it is. It's very mean to its workers. It shuts down a restaurant right after the workers vote for a union. Very few companies will shut down rather than having a union. So a healthy food system would have lots of different companies competing. That's what capitalism is supposed to be about, and not one or two huge companies controlling the market.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Right. You guys should all read this. Because I'll tell you, because this book is fantastic. Fast Food Nation by Eric Schlosser. Check it. Awesome, bro. Thanks, man. Thank you.